Granny D, a memoir. Let's check this out. Subtitle, You're Never Too Old to Raise a Little Hell. My kind of woman. There's more. In February 2000, 90-year-old Doris Granny D. Haddock completed her 3,200-mile walk from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. to bring attention to campaign finance reform. Wow, that is impressive. But I'm afraid if you ask people if they want campaign finance reform, this does not have a very sexy ring to it. They may not get it. But if you ask, is too much big money being put into our elections? They'll say it sure is, and I think it's awful. Why not make a video of this? Let's see. Granny D died in 2010. We'd have to get permission from this Dennis Burke, who put this all together from the journals she kept on her walk. Dennis Burke. I Googled like crazy to find Dennis Burke. Arizona Common Cause. That's our man. His response, Barbara, as Granny D would say, have at it and have fun. Not only that, he sent us a second book about her life before and after the walk. We'll get to that later. For now, I have picked out some of my favorite parts, some of which I will read from this journal, which she wrote daily in her own words. Other parts I've memorized, especially the speeches. Corporations are not people. At the same time, working on her New Hampshire accent, but mainly on her elocution, which she studied with plans to become an actress. And I've picked out a couple of costume pieces, not to try to become Granny D, no, just to capture her spirit along the way. But first we need to tell you how all this came about. It's 1998, and she and her son Jim are driving to Florida when he turns to her and he says, "Mother, what are you thinking about?" And she says, "I'm thinking about walking all the way across the United States for campaign finance reform." Poor Jim, a 64-year-old himself, and his wheezing 88-year-old mother says something like this. "Oh boy," he says, and keeps driving. It seems that on this long trip, she's remembering that meeting of her women's study group, the Tuesday Morning Academy, when she had lamented, "It looks like you can't be elected to office anymore unless you have $1 million. One of her friends said, "Well, Doris, what do you plan to do about it?" Well, she said she had learned the hard way that petitions were not enough. It seems that congressmen were no longer concerned about the needs of citizens who were not major campaign donors. She said she felt for the first time in her life politically powerless. Besides, her husband had died just a few years back, and she thought how better to spend her remaining years. Finally, Jim speaks up and says he will help her with her adventure if she will go into training and prove that she can walk 10 miles a day with a 25-pound backpack, sleep on the ground in a sleeping bag, and thumb her way back home if she decides to quit. In 6 months, she is ready, and he books her flight to L.A.
Los Angeles was a good warm-up for what was to come. There, she was joined by Ken Heckler, the West Virginia Secretary of State and former speechwriter for Harry Truman.
It seems that Ken had just tuned into one of her radio interviews and decided to pack his old kit bag and join her. Besides, his beautiful West Virginia mountains were being ravaged by strip mining coal companies under the protection of corrupt politicians. Well, these two old codgers walked through LA together like 20-year-olds, even though the reflections in the store windows showed something quite different. Forget those, she says. One's youth is always hiding just under the wrinkles, and life is in the moving on.
Her first journal entry shows Granny D moving on and into California's Mojave Desert.
Oh yes, her own words, just as they appeared in her journals, the first day of the new year 1999. I guess my real story begins in this desert, not to mimic the great spiritual stories that begin there. No, sometimes with the urge to just walk into that desert and be done with it. Other times, she says, with the urge to have some ice cream with chocolate sauce. I figure life is what we patch together between these competing desires. Reporters want to write about the hardships of the quirky old woman. This old quirk, however, wants them to write about the corruption of our elections. The truth is, I wonder if this is ridiculous. How far can I get? Am I a fraud?
At this point, a borrowed camper van arrives with Dennis Burke, her Arizona buddy, to help out through the desert.
And she writes about a typical day from her journal, January 14th, 1999. I rise before the sun. Rising early is natural for me. That's good because I take my hearing aids out and I can't hear an alarm clock. I have a bowl of cereal, bathe quickly, bandage up my toes, and put on my steel corset back support. That's enough journal. I'll put on my hat and take up as Granny D. I pick up where I left off the previous day for my 10 miles for today. In the dust ahead, I see Dennis's old van, now my overnight camper and oasis for water. After mile number 8 each day, I go there for a cold drink and a quick nap before my final 2 miles. This old body is never the same day to day. Some nearly sore toe, some pinching or rubbing somewhere, the ache du jour. After age 40, it's always something. After 85, it's always nearly everything. It's better to die out here in meaningful pursuit than back home sitting in my old chair. I say this to myself 1,000 times a day. Sometimes I wear a bandana over my nose to keep out the blowing dust and sand. I look like Jesse James and feel about as mean. But finally, through all the dust and sand, I see the mountains of Arizona. I have crossed all of California, 260 miles, and I shall cross the Colorado River on my 89th birthday.
Dennis has planned a parade in Parker, Arizona. Granny D is to lead it. NPR wants an interview crossing the bridge, and maybe Good Morning America coming out of the Mojave.
Well, heavens, what's a sandstorm or two or a sore foot? Arizona, here we come, with the Marine Corps marching band striking up Happy Birthday. So what if they just happen to be in town for the annual parade? Some people are calling this Granny Luck, but no, she's on a mission, one where doors open for you, and she found her mission early. I bet she's having those memories as she walks along. It's Laconia, New Hampshire. World War I has ended, and there's an Armistice Day ceremony in the local cemetery. I'm an 8-year-old standing beside my mother in the crowd, all listening to an old gentleman struggling to recite from his weather-beaten memory the Gettysburg Address, with prompts from the patient crowd, as in, 407 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation. A new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that that all men are created equal. Oh, yes. Approaching the end, he draws a complete blank. And my mother, knowing that I had memorized that speech from the back of our dictionary, well, my father was a Lincoln Republican. She offers me up to stand beside him, where I hold his hand and finish it. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. That this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. And with that thrill of participation, my young sights were set.
But now we'll return to her Arizona journey.
After the Good Morning America interview, I walk out on my balcony and wave to a group of people standing below. Start to make a few remarks and wonder why they look so confused. They're waiting for the bus for their golf outing.
It was in Salome, Arizona, that Granny D was admitted to the hospital with pneumonia.
And where the hospital staff is quite impressed with my mission. One of the student nurses is holding forth on poverty in America, connecting it with corruption in politics. So even on the hospital ward, it's clearly seen that all reform roads lead to and should start with election reform.
Her supporters told her that she had done well getting the walk underway. Now others could take over to finish it.
My breath's short, but not so short I couldn't bark at him for even having such a thought. Besides, Jim Hightower has called from Texas to interview me on the air as I walk along. Near Tucson, two photographers from People magazine are walking backward, snapping away and chatting. One asks, "How did you manage to stay married for 62 years? Great sex. Seems my opinion is worth more on the road than in my living room in New Hampshire."
Then, suddenly, it was 3 states, 3 months, and 1,000 miles shared. On to Texas.
Texas, here we go. First, testing the shoulder of the road to be sure the gravel is firm enough to hold. Keeping an eye on the traffic. Oh, scanning the ground in front of each step. A fall would be a disaster. Breathing deeply. These old muscles need their oxygen. And chatting it up with any companions only when going downhill, saving all my precious breath for uphill. But above all, grasping that I am here in this beautiful land and in this moment. And I wonder, how can she be so practical and mystical and mindful at the same time?
In the railroad town of Toyah, Texas, they held the first of a number of community meetings on the road.
May 5th, 1999. I was offered shelter by a beautiful Native American and Hispanic woman. She arranged a meeting to discuss the poverty in Toyah and their feeling of political abandonment. So I will be speaking for them when I get to Washington. There is no one for them to complain to who will listen, except a crazy old woman walking by. And I see that more community meetings like this one are the key to making basic changes.
In Pecos, they let her say a few words at the rodeo arena.
2 things I have learned about impossible missions such as mine. One is, sometimes all you can do is stand in front of a problem and be a witness to it. But that doesn't mean you don't succeed. You have already succeeded if you are standing for truth or justice or compassion. And that change will spread from you because now, in this sense, you are the center of the world. The other is, there are no impossible missions if they are good ones. I know that my dream of political reform will come true. I may live to see it here, or I may smile to see it from the other side. But it will happen because people love this country and love democracy so. They have given their sons and daughters in the best years of their lives for it. We will again run our communities and our nation looking out for the interests of the people because that's what a democracy does.
In Midland, they asked her to throw out the first ball at the game the next day.
I work my way into the stadium, find a man there exercising who shows me how to step forward with my left foot, bring my right arm back, and throw. I work well into the night. Step forward with my left foot, bring my right arm back, and throw. The next morning, the stadium is filled with screaming children while I'm being led to the mound like Marie Antoinette to the blade. I nod at the catcher, and he nods back as if we'd been doing this for years. Then all is quiet as I go into my silent zone of concentration. I step forward with my left foot, bring my right arm back, and throw the ball sailing over home plate, and thanks to the absence of a batter, right into the catcher's mitt. Crowd goes wild. And I retire from baseball, going out at the top of my game.
The walking trail to Fort Worth got crowded with Diane Rehm, ABC, NBC, and more.
June 30th, 1999. Some of the late-night shows were making wisecracks. One said I was going to Washington to speak to the president, Herbert Hoover. John McCain asked me to fly to New Hampshire to stand with him as he announced for president. But I thought if I did all these fun things, I would never get to Washington. So I sent my regrets.
Crossing into Arkansas at Texarkana, they headed to Arkadelphia, where they lit at Percy Malone's drugstore,
where the Friends of Bill Clinton group still gathered for discussion, and where I learned about public financing of campaigns. The campaign receives advertising money from the state election fund. Special interest contributors are out of the picture. It seems she suddenly realized that's why it had passed in conservative Arizona as well as liberal Massachusetts, and she becomes an advocate for public financing of campaigns.
Then they headed towards Memphis, where she paused to remember Dr. Martin Luther King.
In Memphis, I spoke at the motel where Dr. King was killed. In Little Rock, I had spoken at the First Missionary Baptist Church where he had preached. I felt like a white bread sandwich at a parish banquet. My dear friends, it is indeed an honor to stand and speak where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself once stood and spoke. Here was a man who came into the world to speak the truth and to use that truth and love to bring forth justice nonviolently. From Dr. King's work came good changes. The Voting Rights Act, the opening of universities and public facilities. His voice still rings in our ears. We hear you, Dr. King. And the truth was this, and it remains this, that we are brothers and sisters together in the struggle against injustice. But our leaders today are passing laws that segregate the people into rich communities and ghettos of despair, that provide jails instead of schools, shelters instead of decent housing, toxic pollution instead of healthy environments. They do this to favor the wealthy elite who keep them in power through campaign contributions. This is no democracy. There can never be true equality or justice so long as only the rich and privileged sit in the room of power, making rules for those outside the rooms. The essence of self-government in a free land is this: if I tell you what my children need, you will help me provide for them. If you tell me what yours need, I will do the same. The trick is to get us all in the room. From this day forward, the civil rights movement and the election reform movement must join hands to sing a song of democracy together. My thanks to those of you who walked with me here today. I do hope that some of you will walk with me again in Washington when I may need a hand up those Capitol steps, and where I trust we shall enter as American brothers and sisters with the spirit of Dr. King beside us and in our hearts.
When they get to Nashville, Senator Russ Feingold joins the walk and tells her that the McCain-Feingold election reform bill has moved towards a Senate vote.
October 13th, 1999. I was invited to come see the show, so I took off my hiking gear and flew to Washington. Ensconced in the Senate gallery, I couldn't hear a thing, but when I saw Mr. McCain pointing to me in the middle of his speech, I smiled and waved back. As expected, it was blocked by the filibuster led by Mitch McConnell.
Walking into Kentucky, McConnell's home state, Granny D is to give a speech.
And she's trying to remember her Gandhi. Attack the idea, not the man. But if Gandhi had been at the back of the crowd, he would have shook his finger at her. But she is just learning. Thank you for joining me here outside the Louisville office of Senator Mitch McConnell. After walking 2,400 miles, I have come here to do him a favor and to ask for one. In a recent debate, Senator McConnell said it was outrageous to assume that special interest money was influencing our lawmakers, and he demanded to know the name of anyone who had bent to this. Well, Mr. McConnell, in 1997, when you took $791,945 from insurance interests who were opposed to health care reform, $602,885 from gas and oil interests who wanted tax benefits and no pollution control, you were that man, and you are not alone. We must do something, Senator McConnell. We must end corporate contributions to political campaigns, for corporations are not people, and democracy is. Kicked his ass, did I not? And I'm still learning.
Heading out of Kentucky, the hills of Ohio started getting steeper and slippery with ice and snow as they walked closer to West Virginia's Great Mountains.
I walked in the blizzard up the steep grade to the top of the range. Checked my fingers to be sure they're still movable. Frostbite would put a fast end to my little stroll. And the circulation in this old body might not withstand these elements. Keep going, old girl. Too many people are counting on you. My 90th birthday approaches, and here's a large crowd leading me to the Cumberland, Maryland train station. What a treat to be here in historic Cumberland, a place even older than I. This is the real America, but I am headed to another America down the hill, where a flood of special interest money is influencing our lawmakers. And if you doubt this, you write them a letter and see what rubber stamp dribble you get back. For all we know, they might have died 10 years ago, and the same letter is going out. But now, standing here in the back of this charming red caboose, I say to you all, damn it, don't give up the ship. Oh, I know I'm mixing metaphors with trains and ships. but I have walked over 3,000 miles, and this is my 90th birthday, and I shall mix metaphors all day long if I please. January 25th, 2000. Now it is less than 200 miles to go, but the snowplows have made walking the road impossible, and I have tightly scheduled permits and appointments. Oh no, but now a miracle. The C&O Barge Canal has a towpath alongside it, just right for cross-country skiing. Son Jim has rushed my old skis to me, and I finished my trek on time.
That C&O Canal towpath ended at the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Washington, D.C. for the final walk to the Capitol.
I walk across the bridge, and there is Arlington National Cemetery, where I stand amid the countless graves. O brave spirits, did you not give your lives for a land where we might stand together as free and equal citizens, and not one where laws can be sold to the highest bidder? We hear your answers in the wind, a wind that must blow through the columns of the very Capitol itself. This is the day, Tuesday morning, February 29th, 2000. I arrive on the sidewalk outside Arlington. The news trucks are there from the network morning shows, and I give my last Happy Talk interview. Now it's on to the Capitol. I look around, and a large crowd is gathered, waving banners. New batches appearing each time the subway stops, then larger clusters, and now a steady stream. Oh, there's Jim Hightower in his white cowboy hat. Over there, Senator Ira Levin. Friends from Texas, Arkansas, Kentucky, the League of Women Voters. Women in wheelchairs from nursing homes. It's like I hope heaven might be, meeting all our old friends again. Now some 2,200 have gathered, and we march triple file to the Lincoln Memorial. Well, Mr. Lincoln, your enduring smile of optimism encourages us onward toward reform and toward the Capitol grounds, where hundreds more are gathered, even some members of Congress. Banners galore, great cheers from all. It is electric. I walk up the Capitol steps 20 years old. Before the days of the Civil Rights Movement, a senator might have said, "These millions of oppressed people are happy with air conditioning." But after all the painful growth, we see the ignorance and insensitivity of such a statement. Before the days of the environmental movement, a senator might have looked upon the polluted Hudson River and said, "It is the inevitable price of progress. How dare they think our country stretches itself out to be plundered by companies for their own profit?" Before the days of the campaign finance reform movement, a senator might have said, "The people don't care about election reform." That is in fact what was said. And that is what precipitated my walk, and I have come to say they are mistaken. On my more than 3,000-mile walk through the heart of this country, did I meet anyone who felt that his voice counted for much in the corrupt halls of Congress? I did not. Did I meet anyone who felt pain or anger over this? I did indeed. Now these people from all over America stand with me to say, "Shame on you, senators and representatives. The time has come for reform or for some new representatives. You tell us which it will be, and we will go and vote."